Welcome to the European Perspective, the podcast that is talking about businesses and business in Europe. This time without Stuart, but with Stephen and as well Annette. Welcome back, everyone. Good to see all of you.
Be back.
Wonderful to be here.
After vacation, like you both have been on the water and enjoying the sun, and I was working and doing podcasts. Now let's get into it. So technology is number one, and there has been a lot of things happening over the last week and weeks in technology, and obviously specifically in AI. Let's go into the first topic. SAP paid over 1 billion for Prior Labs, which is a tabular foundation model layer. Maybe for everyone that has never heard about a tabular model, it is basically Excel instead of text inside of an AI model. So a large language model is learning from language, and a tabular model learns from relationships inside of a table. That's maybe the simplest way to explain it. So perspectives from Stephen, Annette, who wants to go first? What do you think about that deal?
I'm happy to dive in. No pun intended, having been on the water for a holiday. I think it's easy to get swept away with the headlines of billions, in my opinion. But if we look at shall we call it the underlying plumbing, SAP bought Prior Labs, but who's paying for Mistral's massive 1 gigabyte computer target? It's Microsoft, an American hyperscaler, paying a European lab to power its own cloud. I mean, that's quite amazing when you think about it. So while we're all compounding capability in region, and the structural question remains, are we building independent European giants, or are we just cultivating high-end local assets for foreign infrastructure to exploit? What do you think, Annette?
Oh, that's an interesting question, Stephen. What I've noticed in the past week is that beside the SAP deal, a lot of the investments are actually being done by the American hyperscalers and the AI labs. And it did make me wonder about the build we are doing in Europe to become more independent.
Yeah, what is interesting, maybe double clicking on that. If we take Prior Labs, I think they're UK based, so let's consider that Europe, Stephen. Sorry for that. I think there are billions of going into the company, so that's a good sign. If we look at Microsoft and them investing and working with Mistral, it's just a smart move. On one side, they're making themselves independent from their own investments, which is open AI investments, where they still need to pay for the token. On the other side, they embed a local model into their infrastructure, which means they can run it for free in the future, I'm pretty sure. And then the third level of that is EU regulation coming up now. So the AI regulation for Europe is going to be massive, changing a lot of things. I was even looking into that, what it means for our company. And I think we need to even change stuff for us. But even more important, GDPR. If you have a local model, if you have it on servers in Europe, all of that will be easier to manage for them. So I think it's just a super smart investment and definitely helpful for Europe, because if we have a global company like Microsoft investing into a European company and working with them on the commitment, that means all European organization will benefit from the intelligence and the growth of Mistral, which I think is a good sign. Other thoughts around it?
Yeah, listen, I think the default answer as to which AI infrastructure do we buy just changed this week anyway. And it moved from a theoretical concept to an active procurement decision. So, as you say, with Microsoft coming into play, I think people are going to be looking at this a lot more. What do you think, Annette?
Very fair point, but also the on-prem, the developments of the Kimi 3. I mean, there's so much going on, it's hard to keep up.
Yeah, it's huge. I wish I would have a huge server here in my in my office to test all of that stuff. I'm still dependent on tokens and small models. Let's get to the next topic. So inside of technology, Humanoid got a huge investment as well. And I think they're valued at US dollars of 1.3 billion, which is interesting if you look at a 2-year-old company that is building robots. And they're UK based again, Stephen,
Yeah,
on your island.
the mothership.
Now, what is interesting about that for me is it's a signal for the European market that if you build something that generates global demand, you have possibilities, and you don't need to be in Silicon Valley. You don't need to be in the US, and I think that's something we need to push more in Europe so that European startups have the chance, and they got so much funding as well as part of it. I mean, for everyone digging into that, look up Humanoid from the UK. It's super interesting, and I think it's a good signal for founders and people building startups in the next coming years in Europe.
Absolutely. Just 2 years old, based in Cambridge, 2.6 billion valuation. I mean, that's in 2 years. That's a hell of a valuation, and has attracted people like Bezos and Nvidia
Yeah.
in its funding, which almost kind of rubber stamps what they're doing and the way in which they're moving forward. But I think it's interesting that the venture pipeline has actually matured for mid-cap boards, and the old rule that you have to flee to the US for a listing or a mega round, I honestly think is officially dead now.
Yeah, I agree. But I think it's still, I mean, like I mentioned before we started recording, I'm supporting the European Innovation Academy this week and next week, where young students from all around the world are trained or basically going through an accelerator, building and testing themselves and building a startup. And I think these are things that every school kid should be going through. If you ask me, how do you build a startup? How do you think entrepreneurial? And with that as well, how do you take risk in different ways? And if you ingrain that in the educational system so that the kids of the future all have that, I think one part we will build better companies. The other part is the whole ecosystem will grow up with that, and more people will look into how can I generate a company that creates value for other people, solving problems. And I think more companies in Europe that are established here and bringing revenue into the economy will and jobs with that will help all of us. So I think it's quite interesting to see all of these activities. We should just do more of it.
I think the points you're making there, Jens, about ecosystems is a very important one, because if we look in the UK, I think it was Google's DeepMind was there. There's this place in London, and Stephen, you might be able to elaborate, where there's been a lot of activity, early activity in the tech, and now it's a blossoming ecosystem. So building ecosystems is actually a very important aspect of being successful.
Absolutely right. Jens, I'm interested, and Annette, a question for you both on this. Do you think you can teach entrepreneurship, or do you think it comes from within to start with, and then you can educate and share the right way to go about it? All entrepreneurs have to fail, and I wonder if education meets that gap between education and business, and then education and entrepreneurship, and then entrepreneurship and growth.
Yeah, I think we need to reinvent the education in general. That's a longer topic. But when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's not. I think it's not about education in the old school way. It's learning by doing, and then having experienced mentors and people that have failed a lot, helping them to not make all the stupid mistakes and learning from the mistakes, but also helping them. And that was my role this week, helping them to ask the right question at the right time. Because as a mentor that has, I mean, I'm double the age than the students right now. I have quite a lot of experience, and I've failed a lot in my in the history. just helping them on certain things. Like, hey, I love your idea, but what problem are you solving? If we take that example. So just getting them, hey, nail the problem first before you build the solution, so that you have the person that has the problem, the company that has the problem, and then from that you build the solution and you fine tune the solution, but you do that iteratively. It's not you assume and then you build and then you sell. It's like it's very, very fast paced, especially with AI and digital development these days. But I think to your point is you need to do that in a way that they experience it. So
Yeah.
it's an experience, and that's what I love about the um, European Innovation Academy. They do this as an experience. With next week, it's 300 students in one experience, and they all do different startups, and they all help each other, and they do that for 3 weeks, which is an amazing experience for them.
And to that point, it's the Innovation Academy, so it's learning things, it's learning skills. If we start earlier, and some schools do that, some universities do that, to actually stimulate curiosity instead of stimulate to be compliant and sit still and do exactly as you are told. I mean, no entrepreneur got where they were by being, complacent and sitting still and doing what they were told. So I think the education system has a large role in that, but it's also like really hardcore skill building. How do you do a good pitch? How are you convincing in delivering a message? You can be a great entrepreneur, but if you are incapable to convince any investor of the value of your idea, you're not going to get there.
Yeah, agree. I think it's really unpacking all of the skills and all of the things that are baseline. Like we have mathematics and languages. I think we need to break down business and entrepreneurship into similar things, and then understand what are the foundational principles, and then from that on, how can you, through experiential learning, build an educational system that allows kids from a young age to get into. Maybe that's something we should build a business around, but we can do that after the recording. Let's get into success stories. So we already talked about Humanoid. Let's look at Cusp AI. Again, 2.6 closed in 400. No, they closed 450 million. All again, the UK. Then Neko Health closed US dollars 700 million on the 15th of July. Shows again, there's so many things happening and now in different industries. So we had robots, we have had technology again, and then we have healthcare. So I think there's a lot going on when it comes to funding, a lot going on when it comes to investments, especially in the first quarter this year, or the first half of the year.
Absolutely. Europe is proving it can actually catch world-class assets right now. I know we're still outsourcing the heaviest of growth to Silicon Valley, but listen, for those entrepreneurs we were just talking about for the future, the funding is there. People are looking at Europe with I think anticipation, and some of these success stories I think bear that out.
Yeah, I agree. The interesting part of that is it's not just the international organization investing into European startups. It's companies like Schaeffler and Bosch who are investing and doing deals with European startups or grown-ups, scale-ups, which I think is also a signal for other European big companies to invest more into European startup ecosystem. And maybe instead of going to one of the obvious, when you do a procurement process, where you say, we always work with the big 5 companies in this sector, why not looking into, hey, is there a European player that could deliver exactly the same, but they don't have the big brand name like Microsoft or whatever it is? I think it's worth considering in big organizations now as well, because with that, you're strengthening Europe and you're strengthening the ecosystem again, like we said before.
Absolutely.
That's an interesting point you're triggering there, Jens, because before we talked about actually having excess capacity to be able to withstand like geopolitically induced difficulties that one might have. Stephen, you as an entrepreneur, how would you be looking at actually procuring additional capacity, but not just from a big reliable source, but also from a smaller source, so you actually have like more capacity, but are sourcing local,
I think,
even from the UK?
yeah, I think sourcing locally doesn't actually have to be local. It doesn't have to be local. I think you've got to look for people that are in the niche that you need expertise or product or services from, and then take that resource from them. Listen, I work with people outside of the UK all the time, across Europe and the Middle East and India and America. But within that, you're finding people that are just an expert in their field, or they produce that one, let's call it that one widget that you need that makes your machine work. And I think that's where this local buying comes into force. If we think of, it's counterintuitive, but if you think as local being global, but finding the niche of the person that you need, I think that's what we should be doing. I'm all in favor of, let's find it in Europe first, and if we can't find it, then we have to go further afield. But as we've seen, listen, all this funding isn't just a lucky one-off round of funding at all. It's a deep tech stack funded by a strategic industrial capital that we don't need to go to the US for anymore. So let's find those local businesses. Let's find those local entrepreneurs, Jens, that you're encouraging, and let's support them and grow all of our businesses in that way.
Let's go to the next topic, transformation and change. Two boards, same continent, opposite governance outcomes. We have Volkswagen. Let's start with Volkswagen. Yeah, I think in the end, and obviously it's always easy to say from the outside. That's why we do it. If we take Volkswagen, they're anchored in German society, and I think they just need to really look into how do they almost co-create, and that's an easier word said than done, but it's looking into how do you bring like all employees as part of this, all external parties that are in the board into it and develop it together. As difficult as it is, I think it's really all about how do you, as a global but German organization, take it to a level that you have conversations, and most probably that's a long-term process that needs to happen. But really everyone understanding the impact, everyone understanding the problem, everyone understanding in depth what need to be changed, and then building a momentum based on that co-creation to then build the future together. That's at least my 2 cents on that. I think it's super, super difficult, especially, I mean, I'm German. I know how difficult it is in Germany. And they're still very old school, I believe, at least from an organizational context and leadership structures and everything. So it's not going to be easy, but for me, it's really all about co-creation that need to happen somehow. Steven, what are your thoughts on Volkswagen?
I think the key here might be communication. That the vision, I don't think maybe, and we don't know, right? Let's all be clear on this. We don't know the politics of the VW board or its advisory board. I mean, nobody wants to see jobs lost at all. That's a given. But I think if you're creating a North Star and you're creating a vision, you've got to be able to express and communicate that vision and take everybody along with you on the journey. And it's just like we were saying about the people in the entrepreneurial innovation. If you don't have that skill, or it's not a skill that is polished as the leader, you're going to struggle, right? In times of crisis, whether it's a government, a company, one looks to its leaders for guidance, leadership, and strength. And if you can't communicate that, that's when it starts to fall apart. And I think, listen, if the circumstances were different, maybe everybody should have got together right at the very start to say, what does this plan look like? Where do we take that business? Yes, they're struggling in China, but look what's happening in the Chinese motor industry with BYD and other businesses like that. They're expanding across the world and even taking market share away from Tesla and other brands. So VW, I think, might just have to stop, take a breath, and go, where else can we innovate? What are we good at that we can compete with in the market? And that might be, selling parts to other businesses. It might be sharing design. It could, there's all sorts of things in the motor industry, just as there is in any other industry, isn't there? But I think the heart of this problem comes down to communication and not communicating that vision effectively enough that you bring people on the journey with you.
Let's go to the parallel example. Continental sold ContiTech to Lone Star for 4 billion euro. And what is interesting is they go back to be a pure play tire maker from September on. And it's all about almost going back to the roots, I guess, for them. But it also shows they have created massive value with something that they did, which with the ContiTech, and then selling that so that you can concentrate on let's say maybe on the basics again, and something that you have done over a lot of years, and then go back to the roots. I think it is an interesting play, and it looks like it works for them if we compare that to Volkswagen, at least. And they're still in the car manufacturing, or let's say wider automotive ecosystem as well. Thoughts around that?
What comes to my mind is actually the importance of focus and choosing where you are going to play and not be distracted from that. And it could be like a vertical integration, it could be something horizontal, or it could just be a pure tire play. But the importance of focus and knowing who you are and where you want to go, that's what comes to my mind. Stephen?
I'm reminded of a phrase of a guy I sat to on a plane 20 odd years ago, right? And it was know what you know what you don't know, and be known for what you know, right? And Continental is known for tires, right? And they've gone, like you say, they've gone back to the core of their business. Let's not get confused, though, that these are two structurally identical situations. Continental did sell out to a private equity firm, Lodestar, to clear its balance sheet. Volkswagen obviously don't have that opportunity. So I think it's a great repositioning for them. And given that everybody needs tires on a car, I mean, I think their business is a lot safer than perhaps what Volkswagen is. But my hat goes off to them. Great work.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get to the next topic. Industry deep dive. Banking. Banking sounds financial, Annette. So you have been.
It does, doesn't it? No.
Yeah, you have been diving into that already. Share. What is the topic in banking this week?
It's really interesting. Something shifted in Berlin after quite some difficulties. Merz actually agreed to UniCredit taking over Commerzbank, but not just allowing the takeover, but at a price, and it's keep lending to the Mittelstand, like SME book, keep the headquarters in Frankfurt, and keep Commerzbank independently listed. So it's like you can invest, but you cannot touch any of the existing structures. And in regulated industry in Europe, if you don't touch the structures, then capital demands are quite high. At the same time, the EU banking reform, a blueprint was announced, where in line with von der Leyen's line, getting capital flowing is how we get Europe growing. They want to reduce the capital demands and actually look at it from a headquarters perspective and not from a subsidiary perspective for the amount of capital that needs to be obtained, and therefore increasing the lending possibilities. But this was happening on the same day. So Berlin actually creating conditions, ring fencing in practice, whilst Europe is saying, let's integrate further, but integration in theory and ring fencing in practice.
Yeah.
So not a convincing situation.
No, I agree. I think that shows again that we're not all playing together if we take Europe, and I think that's in specifically in old industries even more so, but also politically influenced, obviously. I think that's something we need to get our things together in Europe, where we say let's work together on things from the get-go and really align for what's going to happen, and so that this kind of things are not kind of working against each other. Stephen, thoughts on this?
I have a love-hate relationship with banks. I'd like most businesses, that they're there when you don't need them, and when you do need them, they're absent. But I looked at this with some interest and actually looked at the fine print on these Berlin negotiations, and they haven't waived the UniCredit, but they have laid down 3 heavy defensive conditions: preserve SME lending, keep the HQ in Frankfurt, and maintain an independent Commerzbank listing. Plus, the ECB approval clock is a brutal 2-year process, right? So this isn't a free market green light. It's a political compromise forced by the fact that Andrew Okel maneuvered them into an equity corner. Capital might flow easier under the Commission rules, but national politics will still fight cross-border banking tooth and nail.
Let's get to the next topic, entrepreneurial thinking, to get us out of the banking and politics. Fascinating step. It looks like Ben Francis is buying back his percentage in Gymshark stakes. So he was the founder, which I think is interesting. And I see this more and more happening, that founders go back to kind of take the business that they already left and kind of lifting it up again, like almost Steve Jobs did with Apple in the old days. We have seen it as well in the US, where I think it was earlier this year or end of last year, where the Google founders went back into operation and said, let's tackle certain things. I think it's interesting that people like them doing that, because they definitely don't do it for the money, I'm pretty sure. Stephen?
Listen, I've got personal experience of this. I exited a business a number of years ago, and then went back 5 or 6 years later because for me it was broken and needed fixing. And I'm not saying this is the case with Gymshark, but it is classic founder entrepreneur mentality that you know, you look at the business you created, and you see with hindsight after you exit, hang on a sec, there's a better way that we can be doing this. This is what the new innovation in the business should be. This is what we should be trying next. And they don't see the business doing it. So, you know, just like Jobs, just like myself, you want to get back in there and shake it up, and then guide the business itself. I take my hat off to Ben. I think it's a great move, and we'll look with interest to see where this business goes under his guidance again.
And other success stories from an entrepreneurial perspective, we talked already about a couple of them. A lot of funding goes into startups. Munich Space Startup as one of the examples with 10.2 millions. But if we talk about entrepreneurial thinking, one of the things that I've experienced over the last couple of weeks is that a lot of large global organizations that are headquartered in Europe are rethinking how they're organizing themselves, because what they find out is they don't really innovate anymore. And what they're looking, and it's always big transformation that are happening. And I hear it from the inside of that organization, so it's not public data, but all of them struggle. How do you get an organization that is so big to innovate from within? And getting this entrepreneurial thinking, everyone talks about it, but a lot of companies struggle with that. Stephen, you have been working with big and small companies, plus owning. What do you think large organizations need to get into over the next, let's say, year to figure out their innovation pipeline and like getting entrepreneurial thinking back?
Yeah, and taking away the hub of the business and moving it somewhere else, or disseminating um, the headquarters of a building isn't such a bad idea. In fact, the new Prime Minister here in England, Andy Burnham, is going to have a number 10 in the north, right? So he's going to be moving some of the power to the north of the country. I think there's a real issue between people understanding transformation and innovation.
Yeah.
And people have got to get uncomfortable with the fact that innovation it involves risk. Innovation involves talking to people that perhaps you wouldn't even include in a discussion around, what do we do with the business? How can we make it better? What can we be doing? Right. And it's only by having those conversations and moving that forward with people that aren't, generally in the decision-making process, that you come up with great ideas and new ways of looking at things, or new directions that you can take the business. Transformation is very different. Transformation is about, how do we take what we're doing and just ease it into something a bit more manageable. Maybe it's smaller, maybe it's bigger. That's not innovation in my opinion. So I think devolving that out to everybody in the business, just like Volkswagen perhaps should have done. Everybody's got a voice, right? And then filtering that down into some kind of innovation process, innovation hub within the business that can sift through those ideas and work on the ones that are going to change the business, and have somebody that's looking at transformation of the business, in a total separate silo, as far as what's going on.
Yeah, super agree with you there, Stephen. Transformation, anything that is within an existing business, within the existing organization, is about optimizing.
Yeah.
You can make it better, but you cannot fundamentally change it. Any system exists on its own because it's working to some extent for the stakeholders in that system. Even if it's not working, it's working on some layer, it's working. And if you look at innovation, what you need is actually something separate, like an ambidextrous organization, something outside of the overall system, where there are not the powers that are, so to say. So to be able to do things differently, to look at reality differently, you need to be in a different reality. And that's not as a part of the primary organization.
Absolutely agree.
Let's get us to the last topic, F up of the week. One of the big...
Well,
Annette, you go first. You go first, Annette. Now you...
I go first. I mean, with my image, it's my setup that's not working. So yeah, I'm calling dibs on the fuck up.
Yeah, so for those that haven't realized, that are listening to the audio only, Annette's image is frozen most of the time. And she's at home, so she's not at the boat like we planned in the last weeks.
Yeah. But back to you, Jens, please.
Okay, let's talk about corporate F-ups. Again, big corporates in Europe, and I cannot name them. I should not name them because I've heard about it behind the scenes, but I have heard it from 3 already. What is happening? Everyone was racing in token maxing, however you want to call it, over the last half year. Let's use AI and figure out how it works, which I think everyone should do still going forward. But what nobody looked at, how much tokens are you burning? And with that, if you use the external models, they're quite expensive. And I can just give my example. I have built an agent system early, I think it was March this year, and I was looking into utilizing AI as much as I can, building agents. And if agents are working 24/7, then you increase quite a lot of tokens, worst case. And if you use the most expensive model, then even worse than that. So I had on one day, I had a €300 bill for just AI tokens and zero outcome from that 300. And that's happening right now in corporate. They have spent, some of them, millions of euros in tokens and AI agents and so on. And now it goes backwards. So the financial team has analyzed that, and they understand that there's something wrong because they have the cost, and the cost were there and verified, or at least approved in an internal context, to be able to generate new revenue. But the revenue is not coming. The upside is not coming, but the millions are spent. So what they're now doing, at least in some organization, they're killing all the different agent programs and really kind of bringing them back to basics to say, okay, this is not how it's going to work, and you're not playing with agents anymore, which I think is counterproductive because they should work with agents. It's just you need to understand how to do it. Today I'm spending €2 and my agents run 24 hours, so it is possible. You just, if I can do it, big organizations can do it as well. Thoughts from you guys?
Well, if I may add to that, Jens, the token maxing was actually one of the KPIs that has been used in many organizations. And with KPIs, designing KPIs, you always have to be very conscious of the downside. And of course, token maxing is a downside in itself. So that proved to be not the right KPI. But then the question is, what is the right KPI? How do you stimulate innovation? How do you stimulate learning? How do you stimulate people getting out of their comfort zone and doing new things without having enormous token bills? Stephen, any thoughts?
I think this is classic. You didn't test before you invested, right? And the fact that people are killing off agent programs all over the place is exactly for that reason. They didn't. Everybody just ran towards the shiny light, I'm afraid, in my opinion. And as you know, my background, as everybody knows, is pop-up retailing. And one of the things that we teach people in that industry is that you test before you invest. You make sure that the ROI is going to be there. Might not be as big as you expect to start off with, but there's an ROI from it. Jens, classic example, right? It's €300, nothing in the pot, right? For some businesses, $500,000, nothing in the pot. That's $500,000 off your bottom line, guys, straight away. Classic. You didn't test before you invest. Learn the lesson, go back, rethink. And again, it comes back to that innovation. Let's have people around that have got better ideas about how to use this technology in a way that will give you a great return on investment.
I think there's also point in distinguishing between learning and budgets for learning and budgets for experimenting versus actually investing. Yeah. I mean, you want to to have people learning. But if you start changing your processes, etc., you want to do it somewhere where there's the shortest learning loop. So preferably high volumes, shortest learning loop, and then focus on things that actually add value. So take away bottlenecks, decrease throughput times, things like that, where you can also actually measure value very quickly. But the main point for me is distinguish between learning budget and investments.
Yeah, good point, Annette.
Yeah,
And of course, proper financial control. Sorry, Jens, over to you.
that's over and out. No, I agree. It's key part, and that's literally, if we go back to my small scale example, that's what I did. I built a measuring algorithm that understands how much tokens we use for what, but also what's the outcome of each of that. Almost like a return of invest calculation. Not that scientific, but it works. And I think that's I think it's common knowledge, but I think it's not yet. What you understand if you dig deeper and if you work with this AI agentic topics every day, then you understand you don't need to have the professor, like the most expensive reasoning model for every single job. You can use a very, very small, cheaper, or even free model for certain things, and it just does the job as good as the other. But we always think we need to, because if you look at consumer AI and you use, let's say, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, you're used to this chat window, and then you want to have, like, you have a subscription which is 20 euros, and then you want to have the best experience that you can have, and then you always choose the highest possible. But if you look at agentic AI, it's really all about what is the agent's job, what is required to be done, and do you need reasoning for that, high reasoning, low reasoning, whatever it is, and then use the specific model for that use case, like we have discussed in one of the previous episodes. I think it's critical to understand that as an organization. Unfortunately, for people like me, you only learn it by doing. And then that's maybe going back to an organizational setup as well. If you want to train and get everyone into AI and understanding how to use it, you need to invest time into that and build it experiential, because it's not that difficult. And there are tons of companies that are happy to help organizations to do that. But I think it's a learning system that you need to build out, how you can work with AI efficiently in an organization so that everyone can leverage it.
I think there's also a case, Jens, of lots of businesses continually playing catch up because AI is moving at such a pace that you just find something that just about works for you. And then there's something, oh, hang on a sec, we need to try this because this looks better. And there is that danger. And I think Annette is absolutely right about having this learning budget, this siloed budget where we can just invest time and invest money in learning what is best and then innovating with that, rather than just like I said earlier, running towards the shiny light because that's what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, good point.
Annette, any thoughts on this further?
No, in agreement with you both. So
good. With this, we have covered all topics today. Anything we missed? Except Stuart, obviously.
Oh, Stuart.
Stuart, we missed you.
No, good. With that, happy Friday evening. Thank you for recording today again. It was a pleasure as always.